wake up 2 years ago, 24th of June, to the idea of Brexit. How does the market respond to that? We wake up on the 9th of November to the reality of a certain Mr. Trump arriving in the White House. And it feels that the market has shifted with that news. I mean, has there been a better time for European business schools? Sarah, what are you seeing at HEC?
So we're definitely seeing an increase in applications. So I see that. I don't know if it's the effects of Brexit or Trump or just that HEC Paris is having a good year. Outside of that, I see that there's a lot more people applying from an arts and humanities background and a lot more people who are interested in doing social business. So I would say those are the general trends we're seeing, regardless if they're due to political or in general. I would say those are them.
Right. Andrea Iesa, of course, has a 2-year MBA program, unusual among the European business schools for that. Is that having any effect? You're seeing good applicant volume?
I think, in fact, our class size has increased in the last 7 years, and then we've seen an increase in terms of quality of the application. So that's even better than just the volume. We see more female applicants and more sponsored students. So we're very happy in terms of the increase and the quality. Like you said, I don't think it attributes to Trump or Brexit, but we definitely see an increase in applications.
Right. Anna, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, there's even the 1+1 option, I guess, at SIDE. What are you seeing at Oxford?
We are also seeing an increase in applications. We actually saw an increase in applications from the UK. Whether that's because of Brexit or not, we don't know yet. It's too early to tell. But even the number of students that we have in class coming from the UK increased to 7.5%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for us it was quite a lot. And we saw an increase in applications from the US as well. We have always been quite strong in the US, so again, we don't know if it's because of Trump. But yeah, that's what we're seeing. In general, we've seen an increase in applications from all over the world, but the UK and the US probably were quite significant.
Right. Insead, also the FT is something to throw in there too, but I think application volume is pretty strong at the school, Virginie.
Yes, they are. It's an interesting time because indeed the economies, and we see more and more applicants from Latin America, for example, and whether that's due to the Trump effect, whether that's because European schools are appealing to them as well, maybe. So we see in general some sort of shift. It's an increase, but it's also a shift. We have always been keen on looking for diversity in terms of nationalities, age, professional experience, background. But we see that more and more within the applicant pool. The applicant pool is getting that very, very clearly. Yeah, so a shift from people from countries where we usually had very few applications coming more steadily. Yes, right. Indeed.
David, I figured if we talked about Brexit for the first question, then we don't have to touch it for the rest of the panel. What are you seeing at LBS?
I think to your point about change, politically, economically, business school gives everybody the chance to take some time out and learn to deal with change, have a set of strategies. And what we're seeing with a very buoyant application pool are people, I think, arming themselves to deal with ambiguity and change that might come in lots of different ways to make sure that you're ahead of the pack, whatever happens next. And so I think we're seeing the results of that with a very healthy applicant pool of some really interesting candidates from all around the world.
Right. So 5 of Europe's top schools, and if you think about it, it just got a lot tougher for all of you to get in. Volumes are rising. So the next 50 minutes really count in terms of the advice and insights that you can share with us. Perhaps we can sort of pull back the curtain and talk a little bit about how the admissions office works for your different schools as you receive these applications coming in from all over the world. Sarah, you've got 2 class starts, so you've got you're running applications throughout the year. How does it work at HEC?
Okay, so we have a September or a January intake. The admissions process works the same way for both. So it's a 5-week process. We have rolling deadlines, which means you apply at one date of each month, and you find out within 5 weeks. So you can really get excited playing your life once you've got in. So 2 to 3 weeks after you apply, you find out if you've been pre-selected. We look at your application, we discuss all of the elements. It really is your application as a whole, so different elements of excellence, which we can talk about at our table later in detail. But at that point, if you've been pre-selected, what it means is that we leave the final decision up to our alumni. So my committee, we select you, we believe in you, we send you to our alumni to assess fit, which we think is very important. So you have 2 individual interviews with alumni. If they both think you're great, you're in. If they both say no, no matter how great my committee thinks that you are, unfortunately, you can't get in. If one says yes and one says no, we introduce a 3rd interview, and we see from there. And then we tell you at 5 weeks, admitted or not, and 6 weeks if you've received a scholarship. So I think it's very quick. It gives you a decision quite quickly, and you're supported throughout the process, so you always have a contact person there who's there to answer any question. Very devoted. Jeanne is here. She's the regional representative for England and the rest of the UK. So, yeah, that's how it works at HEC Paris.
Are any of the alumni going to be here? I'm just thinking, we can buy these guys drinks or, do whatever we have to do.
Yeah, definitely we should have a couple stopping by, and if not, we do alumni events quite regularly. There's a huge HEC Paris community in London, so we're here very often doing events all the time, and they love meeting prospective students. It takes them back to their days of school, so they get really excited talking about their experience.
Great. Andrea, just as we sit here on the 3rd of March and think about September, often with European business schools, there's even still time at this point to apply for September. So maybe you can cover that in terms of how admissions works at the ESA.
Yeah, of course. So we have only 1 intake every September, and there's 4 rounds. So we can see a shift also between the regions. Normally Americans, Latin Americans tend to apply, and Asia like early in the rounds. We have still 2 left. So it's March, so it's on Tuesday, round 3, and then April 24th is the last round. So how it works, we have 4 rounds, as I said, and we have a pre-committee, and the responsible of the region reviews all the applications. Pre-committee selects, there's basically 3 selections, either interview or retake Gmat or reject. If it continues, you interview with any of the associate directors. Every associate director is an alumni, so actually I'm also an alumni. So we interchanged all the candidates. So sometimes I interview people from Asia or from Latin America or US. And once that's done, you go to a final decision. And if the candidate's never been in contact with another person, any contact from school, we also encourage them to go to an assessment day to any of our campus around the world, like New York or Sao Paulo or Singapore, to have some type of interaction with ESA constituents. So, and after that, again, goes to final decision, and it's been about 4 or 5 weeks. It's a very transparent process. I think one of my biggest recommendation is keep in touch with the person that is in charge of your application, because the more you know your candidate, the easier it is for us to talk to the committee.
Right. Anna, perhaps even with the 1+1, which would involve another part of the university, how does that sort of change your assessment, applying specifically to the MBA, bringing in that other perspective of other areas of study?
So the 1+1, for those of you who don't know what the 1+1 is a program that we have at Oxford where you can apply for an MSc that you can study at the university, and then you also apply for the MBA at the same time. You would do your MSc first, and then you would do the MBA in the second year. So the way it works is that you have to apply to the MSc and to the MBA separately. So we don't make decisions about the MSc, and the MSc departments don't make decisions about the MBAs. There's quite different criteria that we have. So what can happen is that you apply to the MSc, and you apply to the MBA, you're admitted to both, great news. And then you start the MSc in the first year, and you continue in the MBA in the second year. You may not be admitted to the MSc, but you're admitted to the MBA. Then we may accept you to start the MBA in the first year, or vice versa, and then you do the MSc, but you don't do the MBA. As I said, the criteria is quite different, so I always advise that you check with the department of the MSc that you're interested in to understand what exactly they need from you.
Great. Virginie, along with LBS, in the last year or two, you've introduced the video essay component, and are very excited about the sort of what that then brings to the assessment. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So the process is indeed very similar to what Sarah explained for HEC. The difference is that indeed we have introduced the video for everyone. And the idea was to have an interactive way for you, to present your candidacy rather than writing yet another essay where it's difficult to have your personality shine through lines, text. We wanted to really meet you in person and again have ideas of your motivation, of your soft skills, your communication skills, and we found that a very, very nice way to kind of meet you before the interviews, and that goes really well. So prospective students get it really well, and we see amazing videos from applicants. The only thing before I let David explain about his experience of the video, we have 4 rounds for both intakes, the September and the January intake. And this is one thing that may differ if you apply to other schools, and primarily in the US based as well. European schools tend to have places for all rounds and not necessarily encouraging round 1. So if you wonder whether you can apply round 4 and have an offer, yes, we will still have places for round 4 applicants. We don't do early birds or things like this, at least at Insead. You stand the same chances whether you apply round 1 or round 4.
And there's no discount for an early bird application either. So put it on that one.
Yeah, no, we know the quality we're looking for, and so this is the reason for having also places for.
LBS also has 4 rounds, and as you compete not just with the top European schools, but Wharton, Columbia, and top US schools, that typically operate with 3 rounds, and the likes of Wharton, Stanford, they may have filled 97% of their places by the end of round 2. The flow is a little different at LBS and some of the European schools.
It is, yeah. I think for us that comes down to the fact that we have this clear picture of who we want to recruit and how diverse the class must be. And it's not just the first excellent people that apply. You have to be this and this and this to make the kind of class that you all find attractive and are looking to us for. And we find we certainly wouldn't have 4 rounds and a 4th round if we didn't take offers from it. It's a bit like it with the application. If we didn't ask for it, we wouldn't want it. So you do still have a chance in every single round, but we have expectations of who might apply in different rounds. It just seems to come true every year, whether we like it or not. We see, I'm on home territory here, so we seem to see more British-based candidates come through closer to the end as well. And when you look at part-time programs, that's very much the case. People's decision-making cycles is a little different to the full-time programs. So we see that shifting backwards as well. So there are different trends. Sometimes we're surprised. We see different things coming up. A lot of what we do is very similar in terms of alumni interview. We also use the video interview. We just use that for people who make the cut on the alumni interview, though. And we would do that so that we can have our alumni out there locally talking to you with great knowledge about what you do in that region. And then we can take a look for consistency as well, so we see everybody coming through. It works pretty well. It's pretty intense for a longer period than some of our American cousins perhaps have. But for us, building that class to exactly how we want, it works well.
Right. I guess the British applicants used to figure they could just jump on the train and get to Regent's Park. The last few days may change that mindset. But for all of you, at CentreCourt last year, we had one of the schools reported that one of the attendees approached a school and said, I see your Gmat average is 690. I have 690. I see that your average work experience is 5.5 years. I have 5.5 years. I see that your GPA average. And every data point in this very reductive incoming class document, they said, you see, I'm perfect for your school. It doesn't quite work that way, does it, Sarah? In terms of advice, as you're putting together a class and with the experience that you have, what would be your one piece of advice in terms of putting together that application?
Be yourself, be genuine, don't say what you think we want to hear. that's really important for you as much as for us, because we want you to be happy at the end of the program. So when we're looking at your application, we're really trying to gauge if we're going to help you be able to be successful in your dreams and goals. So if you tell us something that's not true, it's difficult for us to assess if we can help you get there. So it's actually to your advantage, I think, to like really take the time. I always suggest people, when they look at the essays, they like step away, reflect, discuss with your partner, with a friend, brainstorm, have a drink, really think it over, come back and like approach it as yourself and be completely honest, because there will be a school that's the perfect fit for you. So I would say, like, in general, when you approach the application and when you think about your business school that makes sense for you, that would be the first thing to do.
I could see the Twitter that says, start drinking, then start writing the application. But hey, it's a French business school, right? So it's cultural. Now, with such good advice, that question is going to become more and more difficult for the other 4 panelists to answer and make it real.
Last every time.
So, well, who would like to answer that question next? Virginie, one piece of advice.
Yeah, it's one piece of advice, but it's also, I don't want to sound too corny here, but not everyone will fit every school. So it's really some sort of match. We have all our own identities. We have different offerings. So I invite you, and the move that you are doing today is a great sign. So it's the right step to take. If you visit us, if you can come on campus, or if you meet alumni, it's really the best thing, because then you can have this sort of feeling, things that you don't see on the web, things that you don't read anywhere. But by just meeting people, you feel, okay, there is a click. I feel that I belong to this family, and without sounding too corny.
Yeah, not at all. That sort of alignment.
Sorry.
Andrea, go ahead.
And I think one of the things is like, one, and goes through the line to be genuine, is like try to understand what you want to get from the MBA. I mean, you can do either just professional, also like a time of like experience, like life experience. So, and that will define a lot from the different 1 year versus 2 years and what type of focus the program has. If you already know exactly what you want, or you want to explore a little bit like different industries, and that will help you to actually cater the program. Like Virginie said, every culture of every school is different. So I definitely talk to alumni, talk to admissions, try to get your out there, and then this is going to help you to actually choose your school, and it's a match thing.
Yeah, I'll just give you actually a good tip on the kind of questions that I ask on the interview. I always ask, have you met anyone from the school, whether it's staff or alumni or current students? If the answer is no, that worries me. It does worry me. I think you need to talk to the people who are there to understand the kind of school that we are. So yes, following on what Virginie was saying, definitely you should try to visit the school if you can, and try to speak with as many people as you can.
Anna, everybody in this room will be able to answer yes to that question. David, you had...
Yeah, I'll just echo the research bits. I mean, just think of it our way. We all want to be loved. We want to make sure that you want to come to our school for the reasons that make us a little bit different, or whether we're in a certain city or we have a certain program format, whatever it is, you need to be showing us that this is what you want and why. So go into some depth about the why, I think, as well. I mean, the main tip, though, don't sleepwalk into an application. It's a process, and perhaps, what are your motivations? Who's deciding you should do an MBA? Is it you? Is it your employer? Is it your friends, colleagues? It needs to be you. So make sure that you go through the right thought processes, you examine your own motivations, and then you start doing your research to see where it fits. Take advice, of course, from people you know who've been through the process, but make sure that wherever you end up feels right for you. But be active in your search and your preparations. Even though there are a lot of great resources out there to help you apply, you need to be so focused. This is your application, this is you at your best, and this is you fitting whichever school it might be.
So can you tell when someone has, you talked about that sort of connection, or something that they share of, can you tell in the application that this person's really taken the time to get to know our school?
Yeah, I mean, we're a bit more open than that. We're asking questions, who do you know, who have you met? And that's to see if you've actually managed to do it, because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you'll have access to alumni, or you can do an online chat or webinar, whatever it might be. there are resources. But I think it comes to a lot more on the personal side when we have interviews, whether it's with alum, or we sometimes do follow-up work as well. So maybe there's an interview alum taking place, but we still have some questions. We're not going to sit and not ask the questions. We'll get in touch. We'll give you a call. We'll spend some time, or we'll invite you in because we think there are gaps to fill. So yes, we have this organized set of processes we want you to go through, but we also might sort of veer off and do something slightly different anyway. Because at the end of the day, we want the candidates for whatever class size who fit us the best, even if it takes twice as long to get you through the process.
I mean, with so many digital natives sitting here, we could all cut and paste electives from the second half of the program and stick that into one of the essays. So, do you check your database to see that people have attended webinars, or is that self-reported? If someone's followed the research of a particular faculty member, how are some of the ways that you can really see that sort of depth of connection?
So we could actually cross-reference, and sometimes we do that just to know for ourselves which events we should participate in. But in general, we don't do that, so don't worry. Yeah, we don't do it too much. I mean, I think the alumni probably are the people who judge that the most because they're passionate about their school, so they're going to ask you questions. And actually, in the form that they send back to us, if you're not engaged in the school, if you don't know about it, and even if HEC Paris isn't your first choice, they'll write that. They'll say, like, I didn't feel this was their first choice, and that really offends the alumni. So I think that's probably the way that we measure your passion about the school the most. Additionally, you do write an essay, why HEC Paris, and if it is generic, we can tell. But we're not like cross-referencing or like checking when and where you did what.
You've all made the point about the diversity of the class, both the professional diversity, academic backgrounds. You talk about more women applying to business school, and we see those percentages continuing to rise towards a stronger gender balance. Can you be too young to apply to your MBA programs? Can you be too old to apply to the programs? Andrea?
I think I want to translate that more into experience. I mean, we don't have a minimum of age, but we require at least minimum of 3 years of experience. I mean, 2.5 depending on the background of the person. And this is because we are case-based methodology, so we want to make sure that the people that come to class have certain type of solid background experience and they can actually contribute to class. So yeah, minimum of 3 years. And in terms of maximum number of years, I mean, we don't have a maximum years, but also we want to make sure that the person that comes understands and the MBA is going to add value and it's going to fit within their MBA goals. So if you're 38 and you want to go to consulting, I mean, it's going to be tough. So I think that's it's understanding what is the person's MBA motivations to do that. So.
Right. So the more experienced applicant needs to provide some very achievable...
Strong, exactly. We try to take that.
Got it. Right. Anna, in terms of that diversity, years of experience, what you would bring into the program, how does that shape the sort of decisions that you're making?
We don't really look at age, as Andrea was saying. It's about experience. I think we sometimes have very young students in the class because of the 1+1 that we were talking about. Generally, these candidates will have fewer years of work experience than one of regular MBAs. But we don't really look at age. We look at experience and the kind of achievements that you've had. It can be that you've had only 2 years of work experience, but what you've done in those 2 years is significant. You may have 10 years of work experience, but you haven't had any progression. Then, what's the benefit that you would bring into the classroom? I think that once you reach a certain level of experience, then maybe different programs would be more relevant for you. The executive MBA maybe could be an option. Also, it depends on the kind of experience that you want to have. You want to be probably surrounded by people who you will consider your peers. And if you're 38 and you're in the class with 25-year-old kids, as I call them, are you going to feel that you are surrounded by your peers, or that you have a lot more experience than the rest of the students in the classroom?
There's a lot of family messages here that our kids are in our tribe. In the case of Insead, with 85, 92 nationalities in the class, your tagline talks about sort of the global dimension of Insead. How important is international experience, whether through work, living, study. And perhaps if I haven't lived in another country for 3 years, how can I then demonstrate to any of these incredibly international business schools the sort of international dimension to my profile?
Yeah. In the application form itself, we indeed ask in a table very straightforward the dates and travel you have had. But there is much more than just this table, which is limited in size, by the way. So it's in the essay that we will see more the international aspect. So by international motivation, we mean not just the number of trips you have done, and you arrive in an airport, go to a hotel, you don't talk to local people, and off you go. This is not what we are interested in. We are more interested in what these experiences have brought to you, what you have learned from being exposed to people from different cultures. And that can happen in your home country. So, or in the country where you reside. So here, it's really what we are interested in is really how are you, how culturally aware are you? How do you behave with people who have a totally different mindset or cultural set? And indeed, as you mentioned, with 93 different nationalities in the classroom, and in the admissions team, similarly diverse background, faculty body as well. So everyone has an accent, and this is what we are interested in. But it's what does that bring to you? Not just superficial aspect of it is, and would you like to be exposed to this in your career in the future? Would you like to be working in a multinational with people who are who speak different languages, different from your own, and how do you express yourself in a different language? So this is this sort of things that we are assessing.
Right, right. David, you have a suite of programs. You've got pre-experience, Masters in Management, a range of executive MBA programs. So as you then evaluate and take into account people that have got a master's degree already or done 18 months of military service, will you then sort of channel them towards the different programs based on the profile and experience that they have?
Yeah, we do. So we have a wide range of programs that are set up to capture people at different stages of their career. We have a recruitment team that we don't just take in questions. We do try and advise people about which one would suit them right now, whether they're looking for a program now or for the future, and then target them that way. I think there's still quite a lot of diversity within each class, though. So the MBA, the range is huge. It's just a case, as my colleagues have said, of matching the realism of aspiration with ambition as well. That's what we're always looking for. We're always looking for ambitious people who have a good sense of what's realistic as the world changes and as different sectors change as well, and making sure that it's all possible, but you're doing the most you can. So we have the Masters in Management program and the Masters in Financial Analysis for people coming straight in from undergraduate with minimal experience, right up through MBA, the Masters in Finance, a specialist finance program, up to the Sloan and executive programs designed for people who are making a change in their career a bit further through. So it's an amazing class to be part of. And all the students will mix up during electives as well. So you might be sitting there with slightly more experience thinking, what on earth am I going to learn from a 22-year-old doing one of the early career programs? The point is, they will teach you as much as you teach them. From your experiences, that's fantastic. From their understanding of your customer group by being one of them, you'll be teaching them a lot as well. So it just works very nicely when you have a portfolio of programs. If I may just touch on that very quickly, on that internationalism point and the experience, the only final thing I'd say is we're talking to a London audience where some of you have flown in, but most of you are from here. So there's already a huge amount of global experience here. That's not the same. If we were to do this in one of many different countries, the exact opposite would be true. To make a good class, whichever program it is, we need a mix of people who are already global citizens with a few people who haven't worked anywhere different. And as long as they have the passion to work globally, they'll be just as valuable because they're coming in with 6-7 years of intense experience from one culture. And that's what you, as somebody that's jumped around different places, will want to learn from. So again, that diversity of some global citizens and some who have really embedded within their own culture and nowhere else makes for a really diverse class.
Right. We're in London, financial markets. The rate of inflation has been remarkably low, remarkably stable in the last few years. But when it comes to inflation on the Gmat, a subject that none of the five of you have ever discussed with an applicant to business school, Gmat scores just keep going up. Where does it stop? How much does it matter to you? And the GRE as an alternative, where does that fit in? Who's eager to talk about the Gmat and the role that it plays? Anna, can I start you off on that one?
Well, Gmat and GRE, we accept both, are important. I would lie to you if I said that it's not important. Of course it is important. Is it the most important thing in your application? No. But we will take it into account. Yes, Gmats keep going up, and all of us report on our averages, and it's something that you should take into account when you're applying. You want to present the strongest application that you can. But at the same time, what we do at Oxford is we consider also what the regional averages are, so we understand what is normal for that part of the world. Also we take into account your kind of background. If somebody comes from an engineering background, I would expect a high Gmat. If you come from a liberal arts background, maybe not so high. So, we take all of those things into account. But yeah, I would recommend that you spend time studying for it and that you present the best result that you can.
David.
Yeah, just remember what the purpose of these tests are. It's for us to measure your capabilities to get through certain parts of the programs. It's one measure to help us to do that. So that's the base level we look at. There is an element of how competitive you are as an applicant, depending on the score. But I don't think anybody, certainly not in this panel, would obsess about it. We generally like it going in gently in one direction, perhaps, but we're certainly not forcing it. We could quite quickly, quite easily, manipulate the Gmat average up by a large number of points by taking candidates from a certain part of the world, but that would completely undo what we're doing to have a very balanced class full of people with very different experiences. So it's a natural drift upwards, I would say, from the efforts that you're all putting in. I think every school has a slightly different approach to it, but when we've spoken before, we're quite similar in terms of scores and what we use, and if we see a score we think that's okay, it's not bad, it's in range, it's around about our average, maybe below, what else is there? So we're looking objectively, we're not looking to fail, there's a score, tick, cross out, it's what else is there, what other evidence can we see that this person will be okay, and then when you glue everything else together, we can make a decision.
Now your answer is very reassuring, I hope for everybody. There's the reality of a dean of one of the top business schools in New York, of course I'm not going to say which one, who told his admissions team 6 months ago, in looking at these sort of league tables, our Gmat average will rise by 10 points in the next 12 months. Make it happen. That was his message. So with that sort of competition and with those rising scores, Virginie, you're not, the dean hasn't told you to increase.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't. Fortunately, we don't have that, indeed. I'm surprised to hear, but I believe you. You know more than I do. It's the way we see the Gmat is more as a good prep for an MBA program. So that's how you should really see it. You have been working for 2, 5, 8 years. You need to put your heads back into books, into study mode, and the Gmat is a good prep for that. And if you check the website, you will not see a minimum score. And the reason for that is that we are happy to be convinced by a 600 or 590 score. So you should really see it more as a preparation for an intensive program and for going back to studies rather than rushing for a high score. And we see if you rush for this high score and you had to repeat it and that does not correlate, well, it won't make sense. And we will figure out.
Right. Right. And just quickly touch on, nobody in this room, if they're based in London, can present the GRE to Insead because you'll only take the GRE when Gmat is not available, which is probably in the Maldives and Seychelles, right?
Well, no, all the US banned countries.
All of the?
The US banned countries, so Palestine, Palestinians have to, for example, so yeah. So GRE, and for the Johns Hopkins students, we have an MBA, MPA program, and the Johns Hopkins University is accepting the GRE, so we have to accept the GRE as well. The reason for favoring the GMAT, sorry, is because we have a long story with GMAT test. It has been designed by business school for business studies. So we have a good understanding of how strong GMAT and how that correlates, or strong GMAT score, and how that correlates with your future academic performance on the program. That's how we use basically the GMAT.
Right. Great. Andrea, anything that you'd add for GMAT or GRE?
I mean, I think the GMAT, it's an important aspect, but it's not everything. I mean, I've seen people that have low GMAT, and actually they do very well during the program, and they do extremely well when they're put themselves out for the job. So I don't think it's a predictor of anything, but definitely you have to present the best score that you can get. Our average at ES is 690, but not because you're below doesn't mean you're out, and doesn't mean if you have a 780, you're gonna be in. So again, we go again to the fit of the school. So it's a whole thing, but it is definitely an aspect that we take into account. I mean,
right. If I can just ask a yes/no. Because half of a GMAT test is actually the writing assessment and now the integrated reasoning that was brought in 6 years ago. Do you look at the integrated reasoning score? Sarah?
So no, we don't look at it.
Andrea?
no, we don't.
We don't.
Anna?
A lot.
A lot. Okay. David?
Yes, but.
There's a reason we place the chairs in this order. What's the but?
The but is we'd like it to be to be taken very seriously and done by all of you, but we know that whilst it's not a compulsory part of scoring, etc., perhaps you're not spending as much time on it. So we believe very much in why it's been designed and what we can get out of it. We just want to make sure that everybody's treating it in the same way. So I think it's a great addition, and I think it helps to measure lots of the things we're looking for. And we are completely behind the idea of test providers developing their tests with us, as Gmat do, to help us to recruit the most suitable candidates for our schools.
Right, great. Now you've all pointed out, of course, it's just one data point, easily comparable. Recommenders. They can play an incredibly important part of sort of consolidating your value system, what makes you tick. Andrea, recommenders in the IESA, a very value-driven school.
I mean, we do take a look at the recommendation letter, but also it's very hard to imagine that a person will ask somebody to give a negative recommendation over it. So we definitely take a look, and then if we interview and we see certain type of things that doesn't click too much, then we take a second look at the recommendation. But normally it tends to be overly positive recommendation. So we always take a look and then sort of match that with the application, the interview, and the recommendation. So we try to make that everything's consistent.
Right. From your perspective, Sarah, is there an ideal recommender in terms of the relationship that they have with the applicant?
Typically, we like if you ask the boss in your current role. We understand, however, that sometimes that's not possible, that maybe you don't want them to know that you're applying for an MBA. What you can do in that case is really, I think, and in any case where something in your application isn't perfect, is use the other section of the essays. So you can explain, I'm not asking my current boss because X. So that's the ideal one. Otherwise, it would be, again, somebody that you directly reported to at a past company. If you don't have that, you could also think about a client. If you're in a startup, you could think about somebody that you did work for. But I would say just try to explain, if it's not the obvious choice, why you picked the choice that you did. Because that way, when we're looking and we're trying to assess why you chose, a client as opposed to your superior, we can see why, and you can explain to us why you made this choice.
Right. Anna, recommenders are often busy people and might push back and say, well, listen, what about if you write the recommendation and I'll sign it? How can applicants best navigate that awkward situation?
Very good question. We actually ask for the recommendation to come from an institutional email address, so to ensure that it comes from...
So Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo, that won't do it?
No. But of course, I mean, that doesn't necessarily prevent the candidate to write the recommendation. We have to trust that you guys are being ethical and that you're asking the recommenders to write it themselves, and that you choose the right person who is willing to take the time to write the recommendation for you. Yes, we understand that recommenders are busy, but at the same time, this is an important decision for you, so ensure that you choose the right person.
Recommenders always have good things to say, right, Virginie? I saw you nodding your head a few moments ago.
Well, that reminds me of a case of where I saw in the letter of recommendation, I strongly support this applicant for LBS. So that was an Insead recommendation, obviously. So, your tip is good, in fact. And when you choose your recommenders, we strongly encourage you to walk them through what is likely to be asked, like in a normal recommendation letter, so communication skills, teamwork, interactions in a group. So you may want to explain why you are doing this, where you are asking for a letter from them, what is the program that you want to do, and it's very likely that indeed the letter will make sense and will kind of also match what you have explained in your essays, because they kind of also very often confirm things that we have seen in the application. So on the soft skills, for example. So it's good to usually work with your recommenders as well to make sure that they understand what you are starting to, what you are about to do and starting.
David, you clearly have an influential network that recommend people for LBS. How important is it to then look for the recommender, from that school?
So what do you mean?
So if I approach someone who is an alum of the program that sort of knows the school, the DNA of the institution, does that have an influence?
I prefer, actually, if you have your formal referees or recommendations from the people who know you best in a professional capacity. So line managers are most suitable if available. Circumstances sometimes don't allow. Sometimes clients or previous bosses. Go hunting for an alum to provide it doesn't quite fit. If you can get an additional recommendation, that's fine. We don't want hundreds, but if someone knows you really well, all alumni have a very large stake in the brand and the future of the school, so they're not going to write one unless they really believe in it. So that tends to be as an extra rather than, I must try and find an alum. If you know someone or they're your boss, then perfect, works well, but don't shoehorn them in.
Right, and we've given the example of when it doesn't work for the recommender. I've asked you for sort of advice for the admissions process. If we reverse it and say, what not to do, any of you with ideas, things that you've seen that just do not go over well?
Going on what Virginie was saying before, do not put the name of another school
in
your essays when applying. I've seen a few essays where, they're mentioning another school. We understand sometimes, you're applying to different schools, but just be careful with that. Right. But yeah, that's a big no-no for me.
And any mistakes to avoid, Andre?
We've seen essays with the same sentence copied over and over through the different essays, so don't do that. Try to put your passion out there. We want to get to know you. We want to read whatever you think we want to hear. And it's easy to spot from when you read the essay and when you meet the person. So I think just be genuine throughout and don't be boring in the, we read a lot of applications, we interview a lot of people. Just try to put yourself out there, be yourself, and that's the best,
don't send you to sleep, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not about another deal that you've signed, that personal element. Sarah, any mistakes that you see?
Definitely all of those. We see quite commonly. I think read through your essays as obvious as that sounds, check them through. Really spend a lot of time on your application, on reflection, on why do you want to do an MBA. So I think everyone touched a little bit on that. make sure that the essay is personal to the school. So if we ask you why HEC Paris, maybe look into the curriculum. Is there something in the curriculum that really, strikes you? Have you met alumni in the past? And yeah, those would be the main mistakes I would see. And the Gmat, as they discussed, is like just a very, very small part. So the rest of your application, I think you have a lot more room for error. So I would say spend a lot of time there as well.
Mistakes or the funniest things that you disbelievingly saw in an application, David?
Yeah, we often see wrong names or comments on a marked up version on a Word document of, especially coming from somebody else's advice, all kinds of things. But just prepare carefully and make sure it's your voice. Make sure that it sounds like you and it is you, and it links to the school really well. So you made a point earlier in terms of just paraphrasing a list of electives that we have. That won't impress us. Anybody can do that in a few minutes. But linking your story so far with where you want to get to, with us in the middle of that journey, that's what we really want to see. So just put some thought behind it. I think increasingly schools are asking for a decreasing number of essays. That helps you. Usually it helps us as well in terms of capturing that. There are lots of other parts of an application. You've really only got one shot though. That's the thing. If there's one essay, one shot. So you've got to be even more careful with it. But just remember, an application does one kind of job, an interview does another. You've got to be great in different ways in the different parts of the process.
Right. Virginie, the last word, 7 essays, 7 shots? No, what's
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, we have 3 essays. So no, the idea here is don't rush to send in an application. To prepare your best application. And if you have a good sense of humor, make us laugh in the essays.
That's a great place to end. Now, I was counting on the fact, of course, that you'll be able to talk with all of the schools through the rest of the afternoon. So apologies. We're going to move into the Dean's panel, hopefully fairly seamlessly in a moment. I would just share one comment that was made at a CentreCourt admissions director panel last summer. Talk about the Gmat, that good old subject again, about should I take the test a second time? My score isn't quite where the school's averages might be. And one of the panelists said, well, taking the test a second or even a third time shows us just how determined you are. I'd actually just put that on London today. The media was saying, don't leave home. Fill your shelves with food. We're all going to be stuck here for days and days. Thank you for making that effort and showing the determination to be here, to have the sort of conversations I think that everyone is encouraging. And my final word is of thanks to the 5 panelists and their colleagues who similarly from Barcelona, from Fontainebleau, even from 5 stops down on the metro, managed to join us. So all 5 of you, thank you for being with us to start CentreCourt London.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much.